Welcome to episode 12 of the New England Holstein podcast series. We're here in 2026 and looking forward to our conversation today. The New England Holstein Association is a member organization dedicated to encouraging the breeding and raising of registered Holsteins. And this podcast intends to provide resources towards those ends while increasing member connectedness. This episode is sponsored by Eastern States Exposition. I'm your host, Betsy Bullard of Regine Farms, Turner, Maine. I'm also an Area 1 Director for Holstein USA. Each podcast will feature one or more members discussing timely topics from breeder perspectives, marketing activities, on-farm technologies, and management strategies to youth highlights and numerous things in between. I think today may be an in-between sort of episode. Guests will have homework for each episode, naming an iconic New England cow and a personal cow icon whose story intertwines with their Holstein experience. Today's episode features a conversation with two other Eastern States Expo trustees, Beth Hodge of Echo Farm Puddings, Fantastic Puddings, and Beth Kennett of Liberty Hill, wonderful bed and breakfast experience and the home of Robeth Holsteins. We're hoping to talk today about those many hats both of our guests wear, both as trustees for the expo and their own maybe experiences as exhibitors and the various ways that their many hats intertwine with the expo's work. I think we agreed we're going to go with BH and BK to kind of keep on track. So if I slip up, I'll remain confident that you'll get me back on track. Maybe BK, if you could tell us a little bit about your background and what today looks like for you, and for BH, the same opportunity.
Great. Well, thank you, Betsy. I appreciate you having us on. It's really fun to do this podcast with you and with Beth Hodge. My husband, Bob Kennett, and I have a farm in Rochester, Vermont, and we bought this farm in 1979. But I grew up in Maine, Bob grew up in New Hampshire, and we moved to Vermont about 50 years ago. We now farm with our son, Dave Kennett. We've been in Registered Holsteins the whole entire time. I was thinking about, how our registered Holstein herd relates to Eastern States Exposition. And what's really fun for me, I didn't grow up in 4-H and I did not grow up showing cows. And my personal connection to the Big E is because I got involved with agritourism and have hosted guests here on our farm since 1984. And because I was really, really pushing the whole concept of agritourism, that came to the attention of the folks at the Big E and how we could collaborate together and work with Vermont agritourism and New England agritourism and get people out to visit farms. And I was appointed a trustee to Eastern States. And I actually worked in the Vermont building for a few years back then in the 80s and 90s. And it was just an incredible honor and privilege to work in the Vermont building, inviting people to come to Vermont. And I always felt like our state buildings are our embassy to the South, and that working there, you are absolutely an ambassador for your state and for agriculture. And that it was just an incredible opportunity to be that ambassador to the 1.7 million people going through the state buildings. And it was really, really amazing, really, really fun. The Holstein part is really fun for me because Bob, as a kid growing up in New Hampshire, was extremely involved in 4-H and showing. And one of the highlights of his life was in 1964, going to the Big E for the very first time, being in the show ring, and being beaten by one of those Briggs girls in the junior yearling class. So one of those Briggs girls took first place in junior yearling and Bob took second place. And it was the only year that he showed at the Big E. But he said it was really memorable experience for him. He was really inspired by showing at the Big E, working with Dr. Hilton Boynton and really seeing the incredible impact of registered Holsteins was a real motivator and inspirer for him for the rest of his life. So I think that mentorship And that opportunity to go to Eastern States was really a pivotal moment for him, according to him at breakfast this morning. Our son David has shown at Eastern States since he was like 12 or 13. And I asked David what he thought about showing at the Big E as a registered Holstein breeder. And his quote is that showing cattle at the Big E is the pinnacle of cattle breeding and exhibiting for our region. And it's a cumulative test of the strength of New England cattle. I'm like, whoa, David. So it really means a lot to him. And now his daughter Ella, who just turned 13, is showing at Eastern States. And so I asked Ella what she thought about it. And she said that it was just absolutely phenomenal for her. Really, really awesome. And she said that it was just the feeling of being there and being a part of that magic of the Big E. She loves it. She loves showing. I think that David was really mentored by Bonnie Burr and Martha Seifert. Ella is now being inspired and mentored, and one of her mentors is Keenan Thigeson. That whole camaraderie that happens there in the show barn with other people who are passionate about your cows and showing, it's just absolutely magical. So 3 generations of my family feel that it's just incredibly meaningful to be able to show at the Big E. The 3 generations and each of their perspectives on what it means to them as Holstein breeders at Eastern States.
BH, you want to share some of your background and where you are today and some of your expo experiences? That would be great.
Yeah, so Beth gave a really great introduction to showing at the Big E, and that really was where my passion started. Was, we moved from Connecticut to New Hampshire when I was 12 years old, and the first friend I made was showing calves. I thought we were going to have horses and show horses, and we showed cows and horses one summer and never showed horses again. So we fell in love with cows and wanted to be involved in the dairy industry, and getting an opportunity to compete at the state level and then winning that opportunity to compete down at Big E was in 4-H was like a huge, accomplishment. And I believe the first year I went was 1990. It's showing cows down there, and we haven't missed a year except for during COVID since then. So we milk about 70 cows here at Echo Farm in Hinsdale, New Hampshire. Again, we started as that 4-H project, and then decided as a family we wanted to start a dairy farm. Our story's a little different than most, but we have Jerseys and milking Shorthorns, so that's been a lot of our focus. Certainly, I've met so many great Holstein breeders through the years, and as 4-H was almost always with the Holstein showing, we got to see really elite cattle and have an opportunity to see fitters and things like that we would never have had exposure to if it hadn't been for being down there at Big E. So again, that was our start. We decided as a family to make a product with our milk, so we use about 20% of our milk in our puddings that Betsy mentioned. And the other opportunities we had at Big E was having an opportunity to sample our puddings in the New Hampshire building. So first started, you're just looking for ways to let people know about what you do, and having that opportunity. I mean, the New Hampshire building didn't charge us a dime. They let us come in whenever we wanted to come in and sample pudding. And again, have access to those 1.7 million people that are walking through those state buildings, get an opportunity to try our product, find out about it, learn about where they could buy it. And that was huge and invaluable to us. We used to, we'd show cows, then as soon as the cows left, we'd sample pudding. So we managed to, one year we always say we sampled, I think, 14 out of the 17 days, and we gave out like 36,000 samples in one day. That was our height. It was an amazing opportunity, and you also got to know everybody within the New Hampshire building and see that piece of what they're really trying to accomplish. It wasn't just about selling doodads. It's all really about New Hampshire businesses, promoting New Hampshire businesses and promoting tourism and things, and agriculture's tie to that is so important. Those are my big experience with Big E, and still show there today. It's a great experience to be there and have a chance to really see what the rest of New England's cattle look like and how you compare. And the show is always so well run. It's, it's a great experience to be there. And we are now, my sister has two kids, and her son 2 years ago was finally old enough to go to Big E. So he's been for the last 2 years, and it was amazing the difference between showing before Big E and after Big E, because it was like it lit a fire. Went from, being like, okay, we do this because this is what we do, to, oh, I get it now. And I want to, there was much more of a want to excel himself, because now it's all about you. It's not about the farm unit. It's about how you're going to work at 4-H, and you're going to have an opportunity to really show what you can do. And so again, it really, and hit the relationships he's developed with other 4-Hers from other states, has been really cool. And so now, when he walks around the barns, it's a lot of familiar faces and a lot of friendships formed. So, and I would say that, again, the other cool thing is the friendships we all formed. I know Betsy because we used to all show at Big E together, and so those opportunities are really what help build community within the dairy industry. And we need community. We can't do this alone, none of us. And so building that community is so important.
That was a great intro, and it's interesting throughout the course of these podcasts. I would love to say that it's intentional. It's probably not 100% intentional, that connective piece, the connections between generations and the connections between, as both of you so well articulated, with other exhibitors and your experiences in the state buildings, just learning more about what goes on there, and that whole process is invaluable and I would like to think unique to the expo. We had an episode with Commissioner Randall of Massachusetts, and she talked about the tremendous positive impacts those state buildings, the Massachusetts building obviously is kind of her most recent experience, but she had also spent some time in the Maid building, and those small businesses that are represented in those state buildings is a pretty unique part of the expo that as you're strolling the midway, I don't know that we think of, or maybe the casual observer, the casual fairgoer thinks of. What are some things about the expo that you folks feel like maybe people don't know or should?
I think the bringing together of all 6 New England states is so unique. It really is. And bringing them together in such a way that it's not about competing as it is collaborating and working together to just really showcase the high quality. I think one of the things that my family really talked about is we have the legacy of dairy farming here in New England. My coming from Maine, Bob coming from New Hampshire, are living in Vermont, our multi-generational farm. But there's a balance between that legacy farming and being inspired and motivated to continue to improve the quality and the strength and the vitality of what you are doing on your farm and in your business and in your farm community. And I'm sure that Beth Hodge would agree with me that, you're constantly trying to push forward, whether for our farm, whether it's the genetics and breeding of the cows. For me, with having the guest business here, providing lodging and meals, it's constantly advocating for agriculture, explaining to people, educating about the importance and value of agriculture throughout our New England community. And Eastern States is just this opportunity for us all to come together and encourage each other, not in a aggressive competitive nature, but in a supportive competitive nature of how can we continue to improve the quality of what we are doing for agriculture and for our New England community.
Yeah, I think you said it really well. I think, I definitely agree that, again, that kind of community and the collaboration is the feeling, when we were talking, thinking about the things that are really unique, it's easy to point to the state buildings. They really are something that no other state fair across the whole country can have that same feeling. And I love personally that every single building has that real feel of the state. They have those signature products, and in most cases they are agricultural products. Whether they have a tie to agriculture, and that's what makes them unique and makes them sort of those signature products within the state. And people look forward to going in and seeing the changes and seeing what's new this year, what are the favorites that are still there, and watching that, over time, over the years has been really interesting. And I know, I think there's an even more encouragement now of 4-Hers. We've been pushing them to have an opportunity to work and volunteer within the New Hampshire building. I think it's a cool opportunity for them to see that it goes beyond just what you're doing down in the barns, and that the support of the 4-H program means maybe giving back within, working within that state building. You can see what the other piece of what makes the fair unique and exciting is, again, 1.7 million people to have access to that and have an opportunity to see what we do. I think when you decide to be an exhibitor and be a person that shows, you're going to be exposed to seeing people at fairs and things. But I think just the sheer number at this one, and then, add in the fact that these, in a lot of cases, are people that have very little exposure to agriculture. So when you're in the barns answering questions, having an opportunity to talk to people about what you do, when you're standing there at the parlor, if you turn around and you talk to people that, come up, you, again, are always in that mode of like, what can we do to show people what we're doing in agriculture? And I think the fair in general, it's sitting in the middle of a metropolitan area, certainly not place. And I think it draws from a lot of areas that don't have a whole lot of open space and don't have a lot of access to farms. But the fair does try to make sure that farms are highlighted and agriculture is highlighted within those, between the competitions and the state buildings and just the products that we see, and so it's what we do with those opportunities when you're standing in the barn, making sure you take that opportunity to talk to people about what you're doing and show them.
Well, that was a great description of both of your parts on what's unique about the expo, and I think it's interesting, BK, you talked about the responsibility of being an ambassador both for agriculture and much of the work that you do around your day-to-day work. And it's interesting when I take a peek at our trustee handbook for the expo, and first and foremost, descriptors for what that role entails. Ambassador is first on the list. That as trustees, we're ambassadors from Eastern States Exposition to the region, and it's our job to spread the word about the exposition. So I think that makes a great segue into what both of you have experienced as trustees. I know the expo is kind of unique in this way as well, in that each state has a delegation of trustees that serve as liaisons to fair management and certainly offer vital perspectives on the fair's place in our worlds and fair's work in fulfilling its mission. As the longest serving trustee of our group, Beth Kennett, if you wouldn't mind talking about that a little bit, and maybe how you found yourself as a trustee and some of the varied roles that you've played in that.
So Betsy, I was trying this morning to go back and remember exactly when I became a trustee, and I should have reached out to somebody to get the actual date, and probably Marion Seifert to tell me exactly the date that I became a trustee. But I know it's been over 25 years that I've had that honor and privilege. And it really was because of my working in scope of agritourism. And I worked with Noreen and Greg about the idea of getting folks who come to the Big E to continue their journey of exploring around New England and visiting farms, whether it's maple sugar houses or farms, dairy farms like ours, or apple picking or whatever, but to take that taste of agriculture that they had at the Big E and keep going right up 91 or keep going right out 90 to find farms where they could experience and taste more of agriculture. So that was really a real mission for me, and that was how the trustees decided that I needed to get involved. And having the opportunity to be in the Vermont building and invite people to come and visit farms. And it wasn't just that they had to come visit Vermont farms, but to go and visit farms in their own state, or if they were out from outside of New England, just keep the journey and keep that experience going. So that's really what got me involved with the trustees, because again, as I said, I didn't grow up like you girls showing cows, and I married in. So I had to create my own space of where do I connect to the big E and how. And it's really through that, the promotion, the advocacy, the education about agriculture was where my connection really was. But I think that the big thing when I talk to, the three generations of my family that have shown at the Big E, it's really about the relationships that they made. And even though Bob Kennett could say that, he was beat by that Briggs girl in 1964, the camaraderie and the relationships between Holstein breeders. And then for David, he made friends that are forever friends by showing it at Eastern States. And it really has been so incredibly meaningful for him. Those friendships that he made as a kid there continued on now and are really some of his most friends. And when I see Ella, who's just started showing there, really connect with other kids from other New England states, her age, older, younger, that is one of the beauties of the show ring and of Eastern States, is bringing together people from other states in this wonderful, wonderful camaraderie.
Well, that's cool. So I've been a trustee since 2012. I was sitting here trying to remember I cannot remember the guy's name who asked me. He's from my county. He is a retired extension agent and involved in sheep, and he was always involved in shearing sheep. And so he would see me in the building. He was looking for I think he was the chair of our state trustees, and so he reached out and asked if I wanted to be a trustee. And then you get to your first meeting and you realize that all these other people that are familiar faces from other facets of agriculture, because then like Beth said, it's not just going to be, dairy exhibitors. Obviously, we're going to see a lot more of, the whole, all the way around. So there were people that I knew, just from, other experiences within the state that, maple producers and sheep exhibitors and beef exhibitors and, and different folks, and then people from the New Hampshire building that, had some experience through that. And so getting to be a part of a different facet of what goes on at the Big E was really interesting to me. And I think experience since then, you as a trustee, you're put on a couple of committees. I've been involved in the scholarship committee, so you get to see the FFA scholarships and Big E, the 4-H scholarships that are provided by Big E and by the states individually. And I'm amazed at the number of applications you get every year, the quality of the applications. These kids you're choosing between to give a scholarship. It's really, really cool to see, again, the quality and what they're doing, and have an opportunity to meet them when you present their checks. And then getting to hear a little bit more about the inner workings of financially. How does the building sustain itself? What is done with any of the funding that's raised through that? New Hampshire, we have a group, they call themselves Champions of New Hampshire Farms, which technically runs the New Hampshire building. And they have a grant program that is available for groups within the state that want to promote agriculture. And so seeing now today that some of that grant funding being used by different groups, it was actually used by the Department of Ag when they were doing some studies on like a local branded milk and what that possibility of doing something like that would be. And another group I'm involved in, the Farm Bureau, got a grant to help them do some videos promoting agriculture within the state. So you can see how the money that not just to the small businesses, but the money the state itself gets from that goes on to then promote agriculture within the state. So that's really cool. And the other thing I've done a few times, we've in the last 5 years have been running booths at a couple of different expos within New Hampshire to talk about the Big E. And so we have one that's like the Taste of New Hampshire. So it's a lot of different food companies along with other other just types of companies within the state. And then the New Hampshire Farm and Forest Expo, there's always a Big E booth as well. And again, we're just talking about the Big E, and it's amazing how many people have heard of it, never been, want to go. And so having an opportunity to talk about what the Big E is and our own experience with it, and then also the tie of agriculture at the same time, is really a cool experience. So I've been able to do some really cool things being part of that organization and being a trustee. And like I said, it's just cool to see the inner workings of a fair that big, the kind of funding they're talking about and what they're doing each year to help continue to grow and expand and keep, while still keeping that really important agriculture as part of that focus. So anyway, that's my experience.
I would jump on Beth Hodge's state and say, it's really pretty incredible the powerful economic development effect that Big E has in so many ways. It's not just a fair. It really is an economic engine for so many people. The people who are vendors at the fair, the people who are vendors in the state building, the people who come and exhibit their animals, the young people with their beef that then sell that to create the scholarship funds. It's an incredible economic driver. It's a real privilege to be a part of.
I'm always fascinated by how kind of conversations work around to this. And if we think about the Eastern States Expo's mission statement, so the Expo is a not-for-profit corporation committed to excellence in providing year-round opportunities for the development and promotion of agriculture, education, industry, and family entertainment while preserving our New England heritage. So based on what you've both described and certainly my own experiences with the Expo, that's amazing that an organization, an event that has been in existence for so long. And Beth Kennett, you described it as an economic development and kind of an engine process. And I would wager a bet that when that mission statement was crafted or when this event was imagined and came into existence, no, those weren't phrases that anybody was using, but it's exactly what the intent was and exactly what's happening with the Expo today. So I'm not sure there's very many things with such longevity that have that through line that remains today. I'm also interested that you both touched on this kind of newer aspect with your experiences with the Expo, with subsequent generations getting involved and finding that spark in whether it's the competitions, and the competitions are fantastic, they're high level, but those connections that are made, as you're both well aware of here in New England, we're not necessarily surrounded by a lot of farms or folks that are in similar day-to-day activities as we are. So for our young people, that's tremendously helpful for them to have an exposure and experiences with people who like the same things, who aren't, geez, that sounds, you do what for a week and you sleep how much? On you get up then and it's cold and it's dark, you're washing your cows. Tell me more about this. And so I think that's a pretty huge component for all of us as we see our families kind of work through that process and that value of the events. As the fair has, and you both mentioned the sheer magnitude, so far north of 1 million people through the fair over the course of it each year, that's a lot of people. I think that's more people than currently reside in the state of Maine, if my math is anywhere near close, which it may or may not be. As the Expo has changed over time and has grown, what other changes have you seen that have gone along with that?
I mean, everybody has their own perspective, but what I've seen the last 30 years is interesting in that I think the emphasis on agriculture has gotten stronger. One of our current promotions for Eastern States is that, agriculture is our culture. I think there was a time when I first was a trustee that I was a little taken by surprise by commercial interests and the entertainment interests that seemed pretty overwhelming to me and really daunting as a newbie. But I think over the last several years, in my mind, there's been an even stronger emphasis on this is an agricultural event. And this is a place for agriculture within our New England community. I just feel that that emphasis has gotten stronger. There's still a tremendous entertainment aspect. There's still a tremendous commercial aspect. Finding the balance of that legacy and innovation, promoting the advancement of quality and agriculture, and to Beth Hodge, the agricultural products that each state can bring out is so incredibly important, so unique, and so extremely valuable for all of us. And so I really thank and respect the Eastern States Exposition Administration staff and all the trustees for keeping the focus on agriculture for the Big E.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. While you were speaking, I was thinking to myself that except for the Court of Honor stage or whatever that they've built recently, every other building that they've built in the last 20, 25 years has had an agricultural focus. You know, the whole Mallory complex, that as they've expanded that and added to that over time, the now whole section of the, I don't know what they call it, but where they have the wine and cheese and the sort of that farmers market aspect, that was a permanent building that was added, you know, more recently. So I think you can see where the dollars are being spent are on things related to agriculture, which is obviously really important. I think most of us, when we look at our own county fairs, we see how fairs can struggle. You know, there's a few key fairs around the state that seem to really do a good job and or within our region that have expanded. But I think a lot of us, our own little county fairs, have struggled to get people to show up, or, you know, struggled to keep their focus not be just on the midway and have some ability to still have competitors there. And when you look at Big E is really that huge success story, you know, I mean, the number of people that come, the dollars that it generates, and then to keep the competitions as robust and as many competitors there. You know, the shows haven't lost numbers, and even as our farm numbers have declined, we still continue to fill that, you know, those buildings are filled with competitors from all over. And I mean, we all know, I mean, it's one of the key shows that happens, you know, it sets the stage for what comes after it. Done well at Big E, then you can turn around and go to Madison. You know, if there's an expectation and sort of raising that level all the way around of what we're putting out there. You hope that the general public understands to some degree the level. Even if they don't, they get to see a really classy, well put on show with a lot of competitors, and they get to see really well fitted cattle that look so great. They get to see the best of what we have to show. Giving that opportunity, you hope, leads to them having a different opinion when they walk out that door of agriculture.
So very fortunate to have an outstanding team of people in every aspect of the fair, making sure that we both as exhibitors, you know, are able to present that high class sort of event. Beth just said, hopefully that some fairgoers leave with a really positive impression. I mean, even if they came in as kind of a blank slate, we've given them a lot to think about. Pretty cool nuggets that will stick with them, I hope. That exhibitor piece kind of segues nicely into my homework question for you both. This isn't a must answer both questions to get an A on the test. Not that any of us are like that, Beth. But if both of you had some thoughts around an iconic New England cow, and as I went through with Commissioner Randall, it can be a cow of any color. We're pretty equal opportunity here. Cow in your own personal experience that's been meaningful, iconic, however, something that's stuck with you over time.
What comes to mind for me is Veronica. To know that Arethusa was in Connecticut and close by us, and to have that caliber of animals showing up at our shows, and to be standing outside the ring or in the ring with a cow that turns around and becomes one of those one-name cows that everybody knows. Just knowing that a lot of those cows went through the same ring that we went through, it just gives you a sense of pride, and knowing that even though I certainly didn't breed that caliber cow, to stand in the ring and to know that cow is right down the road in Connecticut, for a period of time, and that we have an opportunity to see and get to know the people that are working with those cows, pretty amazing. And I think that's the other piece. I mean, we think about the cows, but there's also the people that we have an opportunity to have an exposure to because we've been involved and those people that work with those cows every day, and you can see what they're doing. And I think for me, it was probably Veronica, which again is a Jersey, but but it was certainly meaningful. Yeah, yes,
equal
very
opportunity
meaningful.
here.
Yes, yes.
My apologies. Obviously, I should have asked my family this question and so that I was prepared for you. For me personally, when David was 14 in high school, which was a while now, a while ago, he had a cow, Robeth Mandel Winnie, that went to Eastern States, and she was a champion cow. And then he went from there on to Louisville. Again, Bonnie Burr and Martha Seifert were such mentors to him to get him out there to Louisville and have him showing in the National Junior Holstein Show with this cow that had done so really well at Eastern State. As the mom, I just thought it was really such an incredible opportunity for him to be able to go to Eastern States and then go on from there to Louisville. What will sound real crazy to you is at that time, our school did not want him to go and participate. The principal said absolutely no way. The superintendent said absolutely no way. And one of the teachers from the elementary school went to the school board and said, listen, you need to let this kid go and show his cows, that this is an incredible opportunity. She had shown beef as a kid growing up, and that gave her the opportunity to get a scholarship and be inspired to go to college. She said, you don't understand what showing cows can be a springboard for the rest of his life. He needs to be able to go, and it's an honor to be selected to represent the state at Eastern States. This kid needs to go. And I hadn't asked her to go to the school board and advocate for David. I just didn't know what to do because the principal and the superintendent had both said absolutely not. To have this teacher go, his elementary teacher, go to the school board and say, no, going to Eastern States is a very big deal. Let this kid go. That was huge. It was really enormous. So David and Winnie went and won.
What a great story. And what a great example of that support system that we've been able to, and our kids have been able to kind of grow and become immersed in through their experiences with the expo and their experiences with cows, no matter what color they are. And thank you both for sharing these stories and your experiences and that sense of connectedness that looking out on the January tundra here in Maine, which, just in case anyone's wondering, is not actually on the way to anything, as it turns out. Thank you again. And for our listeners, make sure to find us at nesholsteins.com, Spotify, Apple Play, YouTube. Really, seriously, wherever you find your favorite podcast, you can likely find us there. And thanks again, ladies. I appreciate you taking the time for this, and I hope our listeners enjoy this as much as I have enjoyed it.